I received review copies of a number of games from Coiled Spring, Hachette Boardgames UK and Amaroni for the purposes of making this video, so thanks to all three distributors for their support of the channel. For many tabletop designers that I meet, their dream is to one day create their masterwork, a magnum opus like Ark Nova, a long, complex, strategic game with a rich theme and many ingenious interwoven mechanisms. Winning the Spiel des Jahres, Germany's prestigious game of the year, would be nice, but for many, the Kennerspiel holds even more prestige, the connoisseur's choice for seasoned gamers. I must confess, that's not my dream. For me, the epitome of great design comes in simple systems. I'm more a Kinderspiel sort of guy. The children's game market is booming, with many prolific and very talented designers consistently producing incredibly joyful games for kids, with minimalist rule sets and outstanding presentation. Streamlined game design is a discipline that I aspire to. And if you're similarly inclined, maybe this video will give you some inspiration. Haber's Let's Cook is their newest entry in their My Very First Games range, pitched at players aged 2 and up. The game features some wooden vegetables, a cooking pot and a wooden spoon, and on your turn you roll the die. If it shows a vegetable, you take the vegetable tile and place the matching wooden vegetable into the pot. If it shows a star, you can take any vegetable of your choice and put the vegetable in the pot. If there are no tiles matching your dice roll, you instead stir the pot with the wooden spoon and take nothing. Once all vegetables are in the pot, the final player stirs the pot and serves the vegetables up on a plate. The player with the most vegetable tiles wins. There are a variety of different game variants described in the rules, involving memory and guessing elements. To create a successful, fun game playable by 2-year-olds is an immense achievement, and while I have huge respect for the designers of incredible detailed works like Ark Nova or Dominant Species Marine, I'm equally impressed by the designers of these humble little playsets for tiny humans. Both are outstanding achievements. I'm Adam Porter. I'm a game designer from Cardiff in Wales. My published games have all been pretty light, with several of them being very suitable for families. Big Bazaar was marketed as suitable for ages 6 and up, though I envisaged it as a game for all ages. Doodle Rush, Quazzle and Zooligans are all enjoyable for kids, but work equally well with adults. My next game, though, is designed specifically for children and families. The game is called Zing-a-Zam, and it's going to be released by Brain Games over the coming months. This is a mock-up of the box cover. It could still totally change, of course, so keep an eye out for it. The brief was simple, a card game for children aged 6 and up. I really enjoyed the challenge, and I looked to games from companies like Haber, Gamewright and Blue Orange for inspiration. There's no industry-wide standard age classification for board games. As with video games, a game playable by children 14 and over is indistinguishable from an adult game. But children below 14 change so much from year to year. It's really important to think about where your game fits in this spectrum as you go through those design processes. A game enjoyed by a 2-year-old is going to be tedious for a 4-year-old, and a game for a 6-year-old is unlikely to excite a child of 9 or 10. Haber are very specific in the age ratings for their games. There are games in their catalogue for 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and every age up to 8. Beyond that, we're into their family line, branded as Game Night Approved. Gamewright seem to use 2-year blocks. A Gamewright game is either preschool or aged 6 and up, 8 and up, 10 and up, or 12 and up. I still think this is too specific for me as a designer to utilise. I'm not sure that I could accurately distinguish a game for 10-year-olds from one for 8-year-olds. In my mind, there are 4 main categories of game which children might enjoy. Preschool, for anyone aged 5 and under. Aged 6 and up, which I would term a children's game. 8 and up, which I would call a family game. And 12 and up, which is probably a gateway title enjoyable for adults and newcomers to the hobby. Beyond that, we're into the wide open world of adult gaming. I think this sort of categorization has some utility. Certainly, I limited the scope of my upcoming game based on the publisher's brief. I very much wanted the game to be one that children could understand quickly and potentially play without adults present and teach their friends. The fine line between children's game and family game is blurry. And I think for me, that's the main distinction. Does the child need an adult present when they play to help them to set up and oversee the game in progress? And this brings me on to the next key point in designing for children. If we want a strong commercial product, we don't simply have to appeal to the tastes of the child, we also need to attract the parent, since ultimately it's likely to be them that purchases the game. So what do parents look for in a game? Sadly, as with the majority of the population, parents are often totally unaware of the exciting new world of modern tabletop gaming. They have no context to differentiate a quality design from a lazy or dated one. Parents are frequently stressed out and lacking in time, so inevitably a major driver of sales is brand recognition. They spot a character that they recognise, Buzz Lightyear, Elsa, Spider-Man, and that's enough to drive their purchase. Traditional toy and game companies in the mass market have recognised this trend for many years, and if parents are prioritising familiarity over quality, there's not much commercial sense in spending lots of time and resources on quality design and components when you can generate just as many sales by slapping an intellectual property on any old piece of tat. Fortunately, it does feel like that tide is turning. As the wider board gaming market is growing, quality is increasing across the board, and I think consumers are becoming more discerning. Parents don't want their children to be exploited. They want positive or even educational experiences for their kids. And online reviews and word of mouth from other families have an increasing impact on their purchases. Hubba is particularly strong with its branding. The bright yellow boxes are immediately recognisable and act as a seal of quality. Parents who want to go with something familiar and reliable might forego the Marvel display and pick up a Hubba box because they know that their child enjoyed other games in the range. I think this is a really clever way of keeping things simple for the parents. Create a brand that parents can trust, and you've made that purchasing decision just a little bit simpler, which in turn makes a parent's day that little bit less stressful. Now, I should be open here and declare that I'm not a parent myself, so my experience with children's games is not as extensive as my experience with adult games. That said, my taste has always lent towards the lighter end of the market, and I've frequently played games with nieces, nephews, and children of my friends. Over recent years, I've actively followed the children's game market because it's very much in the ballpark of the sort of stuff I like to create. Nonetheless, I'm still learning about this stuff, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know in the comments what aspects you think are particularly important when designing games for youngsters. And while you're at it, hit like and subscribe to the channel. And now we're on to the core of the video. As usual, we're going to take a look at loads of examples of children's games and pick out 10 common themes. We'll take the same approach that I have previously in my videos about trick-taking, abstract strategy games, tableau builders, roll and writes, and most recently, roll and move games. This is a toolbox for you as a designer. If you want to design a game for young players, why not throw 2 or 3 of these features in the pot, mix them up, subvert, reinvent, reimagine, and create your own unique recipe. Children are more forgiving of chance-based play than the average adult gamer. If a game is overly reliant on strategy, older players are likely to have an advantage, which can sour the experience for the youngsters. Including a hefty dose of randomness in a game evens the playing field, meaning any player has a chance of besting their opponents. Last weekend, I played a game of Marrakesh with my friends and his 6 and 8-year-olds. The 6-year-old notched up a win on his first attempt, and he was thrilled. The key here is that despite the random dice rolls, the game isn't mindless. There are choices to be made on every turn. It was a legitimate victory. One of my first recommendations for friends who are looking for a first game for their children is always Too Many Monkeys from Gamewright. I don't have a copy here to show you. I gift the game frequently, but I've never picked up my own copy. But the product is a perfect little simulation of a strategy game. There's no strategy in it at all, but it has all the hallmarks of an adult game. Taking turns, turning over cards which activate other cards, creating chains of events. There's a tiny bit of take that and a nice little catch-up mechanism as you enter into each new round. Gamewright lists this game as suitable for ages 6 and up, but I frequently recommend it to friends with 5-year-olds, and they tend to get on fine with it. Another game which is similarly random, but also somehow just feels like a worthwhile experience, is Strike from Ravensburger, another of my recommendations for players 5 and up. In Strike, the dice are evenly distributed between the players, and on your turn you throw one die into the arena. If it matches one or more dice in the arena, you take all the matching dice into your collection. If the die does not match any dice in the arena, you can choose to either end your turn or throw another die in there. And if the die bounces out of the arena, it's removed from the game. Every dice result showing an X is immediately removed from the game, and if you ever remove all the dice from the arena, then the next player has to throw all of their dice in a single turn. If you ever run out of dice, you're eliminated. And ultimately, the last player remaining with dice wins the game. As with Too Many Monkeys, the publisher's categorization of Strike as a game for ages 8 and up is overly cautious. I've had great success introducing this one to younger players, primarily because there's so much busy work to be done. Collecting together the matching dice in the arena, gathering up any dice which escaped the arena and bounced across the table, building your little pool of dice and watching it expand and contract over subsequent rounds. Despite the lack of any truly meaningful choices in the game, it's just a bit of a roller coaster and it's totally engaging. If you'd like to see a few more examples of games which use dice rolls without becoming mindless, take a look at my recent video, How to Design a Roll and Move board game. Memory mechanisms are rarely seen in adult games. It seems to be a huge turn-off for many gamers. Yet in the children's market, it's an absolute staple. The traditional game of laying out face-down cards and then attempting to reveal pairs has been played for centuries. In Japan, the game was traditionally played with painted shells. Gigamons is a more modern game featuring the classic card-flipping memory mechanism. On your turn, you flip 2 tiles face up. If they're different, flip them back face down. If they're the same, take the tiles and put them in front of you and then use the tiles' power. We'll come back to these later. When you have 3 identical tiles, you gain the corresponding Gigamon, you refill the grid, and when the draw pile's empty, the player with the most Gigamons wins the game. You also win instantly if you ever have 3 Gigamons. Many people perceive that children have better memories than adults. It's the source of much scientific research with conflicting results, and I have no idea which way current scientific consensus leans. But the prevailing belief among gamers and game makers is that children are just better at this stuff. Maybe it's because they have less on their minds, less baggage or stress, or perhaps it's because they're practicing similar tasks day to day at school. I don't know. But regardless, memory games, like chance-based games, are seen as an opportunity for children to potentially outdo their elders. Enchanted Forest was a 1982 Spiel des Jahres winner, in the days before they had a specific children's award. And along with Scotland Yard and Labyrinth, Enchanted Forest is still one of Ravensburger's core brands. In Enchanted Forest, players are attempting to find the location of the item showing on top of the card deck. On your turn, you roll 2 dice to move around the board, and you must move the full distance rolled on 1 die, but then you can change direction when you start moving with the second. If you land next to a tree, you can peek at the image shown on the tree's base and then return it to the board, hopefully remembering which item was located there. Once you've found the item matching the visible card, you head over to the castle and declare that you know where it is by revealing the corresponding tree. Rolling doubles allows you to jump to any tree location, and the first player to correctly identify the location of 3 items wins the game. This one's feeling a little bit dated in 2022, but it's a testament to the engaging nature of memory mechanisms for children that the game is still doing well commercially 40 years after release. For a slightly more dynamic take on memory combined with dice rolling, you could take a look at Spooky Stairs from Drei Magierspieler. This one resembles the traditional Magician's Cups and Balls routine. Players constantly swap the positions of the various playing pieces throughout the game, and you need to remember which one is yours to ensure that you're not moving your opponent's piece towards the finish line. Finally, I'd highly recommend Gigamic's Pika-Mouse. This is one of the most beautifully presented games I've ever come across. In this cooperative game, the box represents a house filled with little items which you need to locate. But you only have 30 seconds to peek through the windows before the lights go out. And then you're questioned on the location of each item, which room it was in, and what colour it was. Cooperative games have existed in the children's market long before the breakthrough success of Lord of the Rings and Pandemic in the adult sphere. Team working is such a valuable skill for kids to learn, and adults appreciate the opportunity to temper kids' natural competitive instincts. If your eldest loves lauding their victories over the baby of the family, and you're sick of the bickering, Why not dive into a game of Zombie Teens Evolution, or Bandido, or Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, where we all win or lose together? In Bandido, players each have a hand of 3 cards depicting tunnels. On your turn, you connect one of your tunnels to the maze already on the table. Players alternate placing a card and then drawing a new card. You can discuss strategy with the other players, but you may never show your cards. The aim of the game is to lay tunnels such that all the exits have been blocked off. If you achieve this, all players win together. If all cards have been played and there's still an exit available, the Bandido escapes and all players lose. In Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, players work together to escape the house with 8 jewels before 6 of the rooms become haunted. On your turn, you roll a die. This tells you whether you need to place a ghost on the board. You flip over a card and you place a ghost onto the corresponding room. You can then move up to the number showing on the dice. If you end your move in a room with a treasure, you place it in your backpack, and on future turns you can move it out of the building to drop it off by the door. If you end your move in a room with a ghost, you must roll 1 fighting die. If you get the ghost result, you can remove 1 ghost from the room. If there are other players in the room with you, you can instead roll 2 dice. If there are ever 3 ghosts in a room, that room becomes haunted, and if a ghost is ever placed in a haunted room, it instead moves sequentially up the lettered rooms until it finds an available space. You can only unhaunt a room if you have at least 2 players in the same room. When you roll a fighting dice, if you roll at least 1 haunting symbol, you remove the haunted token from the board. If all 8 jewels are removed from the house, the players all win together. If 6 rooms are haunted, the players all lose. A real highlight of Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters is those great little ghosts. They're just awesome toys. Which kid wouldn't want to play with those, with or without a rulebook to guide their play? Toy-like components are a real draw in the children's market. A simple, abstract strategy game can really capture a child's imagination if the components are bright and tactile with a bit of character. Monkey from Flying Games is a simple push-your-luck game for 2 players with a pair of really cute plastic monkeys competing to gather various treasures. On your turn, you move your monkey any distance in a line and then start turning over jars with fruit in them. You can turn over any fruit in the same row or column as long as there are no obstacles in the way. But if you turn over 2 matching fruit, you get nothing, and the fruits are placed on the statue spaces at the corner of the board. Alternatively, on your turn, you can flip a token to take all matching fruits from a corner statue. But you only get to unflip those tokens later in the game if you forfeit a turn. The first player to gather all 8 coloured fruits, or 4 golden fruits, wins the game. In Moonlight Castle, on your turn, you spend a pebble to move your pawn to the matching coloured space on the board. Some spaces allow you to draw additional pebbles from the bag, and then if you're able to turn in the correct coloured pebbles, you can take the tile next to your pawn from the track. The reverse side of most of the tiles have spells on them, which might allow you a second turn, but most of them move new tiles onto the track. And this is done with a clever little mechanism whereby the wizard is pulled back from the castle and then pushed back towards it to dispense a new tile. When the end game tile is dispensed, the player with the most gems in their pile wins. I love it when a game takes an already fun activity and builds a game around it. Coconuts is essentially beer pong without the beer. Players attempt to catapult coconuts into the various cups laid out on the table in order to score points. 2020 Kinderspiel's Jahreswinner Hedgehog Roll is a game where players roll a fuzzy tennis ball across the table in an attempt to collect felt items which stick to the ball as it rolls. 2019 Kinderspiel's Jahreswinner Valley of the Vikings also has a rolling ball, but this time we're essentially playing Skittles, with the barrels that you need to knock over determining the actions that you get to take on each turn. With Coconuts, Hedgehog Roll and Valley of the Vikings, we've wandered into the world of dexterity games, another staple in the children's market. As with randomizers and memory mechanisms, dexterity acts as a great leveler. A child has the potential to be as capable as an adult, or perhaps even more so. They're certainly likely to spend far more time perfecting their skills. 2017 Kinderspiel's Jahreswinner Ice Cool is one of the best examples of the genre. Players flick wobbly penguins around an arena, trying to make it through doorways to collect coloured tokens without getting hit by the hall monitor penguin. Rhino Heroes Super Battle is a stacking game from Harbour. Each player has a hand of 3 floor cards. On your turn, you play one of your floor cards, but it must be supported by the walls shown on the card. These could be short walls or tall walls. Some floors also require you to hang a monkey on them. You then roll a die and climb or descend your playing piece that many floors. If you end up at the same level as an opponent, you must battle by each rolling a die. The player who rolls the lowest result must move down one level. If you're ever at the highest point, you take the medal. When the tower inevitably collapses, the player holding the medal wins the game, unless they were the one that made the tower fall. Few games can match the tension of a stacking game. The payoff is huge. Stand-up moments as the tower wobbles after a player pulls off an impossible move, and joyful squeals as Dad overreaches, causing the tower to collapse dramatically, the moment everyone's been waiting for. Kids are vindictive little monsters, and they love to destroy their opponents. Of course, the bragging rights are even more delicious if that opponent is mum or dad. And that's where Take That comes in. Another often derided mechanism in adult games, Take That is much more commonplace in children's games. Kids enjoy it, at least until they're targeted themselves, and then the parents are left to deal with the arguments and tantrums which inevitably follow. Aside from the obvious appeal to the mischievous little troublemakers in our families, Take That, once again, serves as an equaliser. Kids can team up on their parents in order to have a fighting chance of winning, and parents can selectively temper their own attacks to keep peace around the table. It's a recurring theme, isn't it? Children want a level playing field, and it's our jobs as designers to make that happen. Take That mechanisms are one way of doing that. Sleeping Queens is one of Gamewright's most popular card games. It's listed as ages 8 and up, but I've often played this with younger players, often recommending it as a next step once they've got to grips with its stablemate, Too Many Monkeys. Indeed, the game was invented by a 6-year-old, Miranda Evarts, assisted by her family, in a similar manner to the recent development of Cora Quest by the inspirational team of Dan and Cora Hughes. In Sleeping Queens, players take turns to play a card. If you play a king, you get to wake up a sleeping queen from the centre of the table. If you play a knight, you can steal a queen from in front of another player. That is, unless they play a dragon, which prevents the knight's effect. Playing a potion allows you to put an opponent's queen back to sleep, unless they counter the effect with a wand. You can also discard a card, or a pair of matching cards, or 3 numbered cards which make an addition equation, for example 2 plus 3 equals 5. You then refill your hand back to 5 cards. The first player to collect 5 queens, or a set point total from queens dependent on player count, wins the game. There's limited information currently available about the upcoming 2022 release of Sleeping Queens 2, but it looks to have even more special powers, an element of dice rolling, and a total role reversal, with the queens this time coming to the rescue of the kings. The special powers in memory game Gigamons are a mix of Take That effects and more positive abilities. When you match 2 Floramons, you can collect a tile from the stack. When you match 2 Pyromons, you can destroy another player's tile. When you match 2 Hydromons, everybody else at the table closes their eyes and you can peek at 4 of the face-down tiles in play. When you match 2 Aeromons, you can swap one of your tiles with one belonging to another player. While I do think that children are excited by negative interaction in the form of targeted attacks on their opponents, they also clearly take pleasure in their own unique abilities, the things which make them special, even if just for a moment. Almost every game in the Helvetique Pocket line is aimed at ages 6 and up, and virtually all of them feature special powers or abilities on the cards. Special powers in Sleeping Queens and Gigamons do make the games feel chaotic, but they also lift them and make them interactive and vibrant. If we're going to compete with video games and cartoons and Marvel movies, we need a bit of that in our games. Another area where children can compete on a relatively level playing field with adults is observation. In its simplest form, this could be the traditional card game Snap. But in the modern toy and game industry, Dobble is the poster child for observation games, and it's sold a ton. In a few short years, Dobble, or Spot It as it's known in the US, has joined the ranks of Guess Who, Battleships and Connect 4 as an immediately recognisable, well-loved game for families. Ghost Blitz from Zoc Verlag is another game in this vein, which is lifted by some lovely toy-like components. Players race to grab the correct item based on the image on the card. If the image matches an item exactly, you must grab that item. But if there is no matching image, You must grab the item which isn't represented at all, either by colour or by shape. It's a really tricky, mind-bending little puzzle, especially when done at speed. Micro Macro won the Spiel des Jahres in 2021, and while the violent theme isn't very family-friendly, the activity involved is essentially an evolution of the Where's Wally books. Wonderforge and Ravensburger have had big success with their I Found It series, which is essentially a cooperative Where's Wally style picture hunting game against the clock. Various themes have been laid over this basic structure: Disney, DreamWorks, Star Wars, Marvel, all the usual candidates. Gigamic has a pair of lovely little tinned observation games in Difference and Difference Junior. In these games, two apparently identical cards are laid on the table, and players are tasked with spotting the two differences that exist between any two cards in each set. It's a small step from observation games like Difference and Dobble to logic puzzles. In their most basic form, these are often solitaire exercises, such as the range of puzzles from Smart Games. As a side note, look at the exceptional toy-like components on these. But puzzles can be gamified and made interactive, often by adding a race element. Dr. Eureka is a classic speed puzzle from Blue Orange. A card is revealed and players race to tip coloured balls from one test tube to another without spilling them in order to match the image shown on the card. It's a very effective combination of several key components of the children's game genre: dexterity, toy-like components, logic and deduction. Catamino Jr. packages many different puzzles and activities together into a single box, with varying difficulties. It's a toolbox for an inquisitive child, or for use in a classroom, or as an educational activity with parents. As with the original Catamino game, the basic activity involves filling a predetermined shape with polyomino-shaped wooden blocks. Later activities put this on a vertical plane, with players racing to complete three-dimensional blocks using specified shapes. There are even activities for very young kids, using the shapes to create simple pictures. I mentioned earlier that sometimes parents are looking for something a little bit more educational, and Catamino Jr. is just such a product. It's fun and challenging, but it certainly sneaks a little bit of geometry into the mix. Games are a great way of firing up children's imaginations. Whether that's by incorporating a fantastical setting like that in Moonlight Castle, enabling free roleplay for very young children with playsets like the cooking kit in Let's Cook, allowing them to create their own narrative with storytelling tools like Rory's Story Cubes, or gamifying a favourite activity, as we see with choose your own adventure books like Finding the Dragon. Rory's Story Cubes are such lovely little components. I couldn't resist picking up a full set with a collector's box to store them in. Among gamers, the cubes are widely considered part of the board gaming family, despite the fact that there's arguably no game involved. Players simply roll a handful of cubes and then tell a story taking inspiration from the icons displayed. There once was a young man with a big brain, and he spent years and years training to become a dentist. His prospects were good, he could have earned loads of money, but instead he spent all his time thinking about dice games and card games and talking about them endlessly on YouTube. Oh, and he had 3 dogs. The cubes have a similar function to the beautiful Story World cards that I came across in a bookshop 15 or 20 years ago. Deal out 2 or 3 cards and use them as inspiration for your own stories. In the Story World sets, the cards feature questions about the images to get you started. A quick Google search suggests you can still pick these cards up at a decent price, and I highly recommend doing so. Finding the Dragon is a choose-your-own-adventure book for young readers, distributed in the UK by Hachette Boardgames. It's a really delightful little product, and the story is so cleverly gamified. On each page, you're given a choice of 3 options, each of which requires you to flip a number of pages. Often the result of your decision depends on which character you chose at the start of the game, or any items that you might have collected along the way. Gathered items are recorded by rotating the coloured dials at each corner of the book. And at the end of the adventure, you're given a score based on the number of wounds that you took, and you're encouraged to play again, perhaps using a different character. The series is called My First Adventure, and it does indeed feel like a little junior version of narrative games like Cartaventura or Cosmos' adventure games. And so we've come full circle, with both of those games clearly inspired by fighting fantasy and choose-your-own-adventure books from the 80s. And that leads me to my final category: junior versions of popular adult games. I think this is a growing part of the market. There have always been junior versions of Monopoly, Scrabble, Trivial Pursuit, etc. And when the board game renaissance happened in the late 90s or early 2000s, it wasn't long before Settlers of Catan was followed by Catan Junior. Carcassonne was followed by Kids of Carcassonne, and Ticket to Ride was followed by Ticket to Ride First Journey. The reason these products exist is not because the kids are asking for them. It's because the majority of board game purchases for children are made by adults. The average parent is likely to be wary about taking a chance on a totally unknown new game for kids. If they can pick up a junior edition of a game that they themselves love, it feels like a much safer bet. This trend shows no sign of slowing down. The two runners-up for the 2022 Kinderspiel des Jahres award were both junior versions of popular adult games, Quacks of Quedlinburg and Ganz Schön Clever. As the adult board game industry expands year on year, more and more parents are going to be looking to share their favourite hobby with their offspring. Expect junior editions of Wingspan, Terraforming Mars and Pandemic. They may not be a real thing just yet, but they will come, mark my words. Of course, if you want a Pandemic light experience, you could always just play Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters. The core gameplay is very similar. Or perhaps Pandemic designer Matt Leacock's Forbidden Island, which also uses a similar engine. Gamewright have a habit of producing introductory versions of popular game genres. Sushi Go is essentially Seven Wonders Junior by another name. Likewise, Abandon All Artichokes plays like a pared-back Dominion. Happy City is a Splendor Light experience for younger players. The value of these products is that they don't condescend the children who play them. They don't send kids away to focus on simplistic, banal activities. They welcome youngsters into the hobby, inviting them to share in the ingenious, inspiring, and sometimes challenging mechanisms which adults enjoy. And that brings me back to Zing-a-Zam, my upcoming game, which essentially functions as something like my first trick-taking game. My starting point was to totally reimagine my earlier trick-taker, Pikoko, into a junior edition, though you'll find that little of the earlier game remains in the final product, except that, as in Pikoko, in Zing-a-Zam, players hold their cards facing outwards, so that they can't see the cards that they have in their own hand. I certainly studied Too Many Monkeys to try to gauge an appropriate complexity level for a game for 6 years and up, and I was also inspired by games like Sleeping Queens and Gigamons, incorporating special powers onto each of the cards. Even a touch of Take That. In common with most trick takers, there's a bit of memory involved, and the presentation is all rather fantastical. I look forward to telling you more about it as it approaches its final production. I hope you found this video helpful. Maybe it inspired you to get designing games for your own kids, or to pitch to a children's game publisher. Or maybe it just gave you loads of games to explore with the little gamers in your own life. Either way, let me know in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Until then, all the best.